You ready? All right, well, good morning. Welcome back to Fabrication 101. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As you can see, I got the Bronco backed out of the garage. I'm gonna play with the Premier Power Welder a little bit this morning. I thought I'd take you guys along so you can see how this thing works. Quick update real quick if you didn't notice, or if you don't follow the Instagram for Fabrication 101, I do have my winch installed. It is a Warn Xeon Platinum 10S, pretty sweet winch. It does have some provisions for auxiliary lights that you can control with the wireless remote, which will probably get added on here at some point. Just doing little bits at a time now, so super pleased with the way it looks. It's all wired up, connected all the way to the back. So anyway, onto the welder. The way this thing works is you obviously connect your welding leads, you run the motor, and then you've got a idle control here, so you can bring your RPMs up, and then you can get your voltage where you need it on the scale. Now, this is a little different than the normal stick welder because normally on a stick welder or SMAW machine, you set your amperage and not your voltage. So they do send you a little chart here for figuring out what voltages you want to be running for your different electrodes. It is an AC machine, so you got to pay attention to what type of electrodes you're using. For today, I've picked up just a couple different styles. Normally, in my welding program and a lot of welding programs that I know of, they basically teach two different electrodes. They teach 60-10 and 70-18, and primarily there's lots of different ones out there, but primarily the 60-10 is used in the pipeline industry, and 70-18 is in the structural industry. So those are kind of the two. There's lots of different ones, lots of variations on those. So I kind of stuck with those for what I would use for this thing, but there's one difference. Instead of 60-10, I went with some 60-11, and I just picked this up at I think it was Tractor Supply. So and this is 332 60-11, and then over here I've got some 70-18 332, and then some 1/8 inch 70-18. If you're not real familiar with the way what these numbers mean, they do mean something. The first two, if there's only 4 digits, the first two numbers indicate the minimum tensile strength of the weld. So in this case, we've got 70,000 PSI, and then over here we've got 60,000 PSI tensile strength weld. The third number in this case indicates weld position, and then a 1 is an all position electrode. So both of these 7018 and 6011 can be used in all position. And then the 8, or the 4th number in there, talks about the current characteristics and the flux coding on the electrode. In this case, anything that ends in a 5, 6, or 8 is considered to be a low hydrogen electrode. And then this one's a little different. So the 1 basically tells me that it's a deep penetrating electrode and a fast fill, I believe. But it can be used with AC, and this is the difference between 6010 and 6011. Is the 6011 can be used with an AC current machine, whereas the 6010 you can do it, it just doesn't like it as well. So that's why I'm going with 6011 with this little machine as opposed to 6010. There is one other electrode I'd like to, if I'm going to carry this around mainly for repair purposes, is this. This is a high nickel rod. You can't really see that on there, but anyway, this is for welding cast iron, and it works really well. You do have to preheat your material, so I'm not quite sure how I'd be able to do that if I was welding out in the field with this thing, because I'm not going to be carrying a torch with me. But it does work. I have used this stuff in the past. In fact, my exhaust manifold that's on the Bronco, I modified and welded using these rods. So I do know this stuff works and works fairly well. One thing about, particularly about 7018 or low hydrogen electrodes, is they do need to be kept airtight in a hermetically sealed environment, so there's no moisture gets into them. No electrodes like to be wet or have oil on them, but 7018 is pretty particular to high humidity. The flux coating will actually suck up the moisture, so it's important to keep it in a dry environment, and that's what these rod guards are pretty cool for. You can see I've had this one for quite a while, but they have a rubber lip gasket on them, and so they are relatively airtight, and so they're good for storing electrodes inside of them and for use out in the field if you're putting them on a service truck, or in my case, putting them in my rig, my rock crawler, so that I can do repairs on the trail if I need to. So we'll get some of these out. I dug out some scrap material to play with. I got a couple different thicknesses here, quite a few actually. So I got some 1/8 inch material here. This is quarter. I got some 3/16 and some more quarter, 1/8 inch, and this is some of that 16 gauge that I used for my fenders, and then some 120 wall tubing. So kind of a mixture of all the different types that would be on a rig like this. So we'll get to playing with them a little bit. Alright, so here we go. We're going to be trying some 332 6011 rod. This should run really well, but I do struggle with it a little bit. I kind of decided that even at idle, the heat was too high. It was just burning the rod away so fast I couldn't keep it going without just burying it in there. So I think I need to step up to some 1/8 inch 6011 and see how that goes. I just couldn't find any at the time that I was making this video. Let's start now here with some 332 7018. Did stick a little bit at the beginning. Probably could have had a better ground connection. Overall, it ran really well. I think the first pass here was at about 45 volts. Again, not amperage. It ran really well. And then I think I did the next pass at about 50 volts. I did like the 50 volt pass a little bit better. The weld was a little bit flatter. The puddle just kind of flowed in real nicely, as you can see here. Overall, I think this is running really well. I'm super pleased with this thing. All right, so we switched up to the 1/8" 7018. It also ran very well. First pass was about 55 or 50 volts. Second pass about 55. This is the 50-volt pass here, which I did like quite a bit better. Overall, it ran pretty smooth. You can see the puddles flowing out nice. I'm pretty happy with the way this thing runs. So you could see that here's my beads. I believe it's still a little warm. These were the 6011s, which I was having some trouble with getting to run very nicely. I don't know what the deal is with those. And then all these are 7018. These are 332, and then these are 1/8" 7018. So let's go ahead and clean the slag off of those and see what they look like. It's that way a little bit. If you guys are kind of new to stick welding, chipping hammers are great, but they're not really meant for pounding the crap out of your weld. They're really just meant to rake like this. If you're ever getting into structural welding and where the welds have to be x-rayed, sometimes those heavy chipping marks can show up as a defect in a weld. So you want to be real careful about getting crazy hammering away. So let's give those a little wire brush. So not too bad. I really like that 7018. You can see where I bumped up my voltage just a little bit. And again, it is voltage, not amperage on this machine. So this is a 7018. I think I was running about 50 volts on this one, and then I bumped it up to 55 here. And just that little 5-volt difference made quite a difference. It's still maybe a hair tall. Maybe I could have been going just a little bit faster, but not too bad looking of a weld. And then this is my 1/8". The first one, I think I started at like 55 or 50, and then I bumped it up again. I think I could be going a little bit hotter yet with this one, or maybe even just moving a little faster. You can see my beads a little stacked up there. So not too bad. I'm pretty pleased with it. I think generally, for most instances, I would be running 7018 with this thing. 7018 is going to give you a stronger weld because the base metal strength, it is actually 70,000 psi is higher than normal mild steel, which has a tensile strength of about 55,000 psi. So there you go. This thing works pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with it. I did plug in my grinder to see how it ran, and it runs pretty good. One thing the manufacturer does say is that you need to run a brushless power tool as opposed to brushed. I don't really know what I know the difference between the two types of tools, but I don't know why one over the other. I'd have to talk to the manufacturer and see what their thoughts are on that and why that is. I have seen people use like a cheap Harbor Freight grinder with one of these, and those I'm pretty sure do come with brushes because I've bought some of those before, and within a few minutes those grinders are smoking and burning up. So there's something about the way that the current that's produced by this machine and the alternator, and it doesn't like the brushed motors don't like them. So let's go ahead and try some of this cast rod or high nickel. They like the nickel because it's very ductile, so it kind of flexes and stretches with the cast iron as it cools. So let's run some of this. I don't have any cast around that I want to play on, but if you do get this stuff, you can practice on regular mild steel. It welds pretty similar, so let's go ahead and try some of that. This is 1/8". so there's that. This is the nickel rod. It seemed to run pretty good. It actually ran better before I turned the heat up a little bit. Ran pretty good. So that's that nickel rod, high ductility, so it's good for welding cast iron and stuff like that. So, all right, well, I think that's going to do it for this video. Obviously, getting out here stick welding, it's getting a little warm. Bronco's running really well. I do have I think an injector leaking. I think I mentioned that in the last video, so that's going to have to get dealt with, and a valve cover gasket. So the injectors give me a good excuse to upgrade those, maybe put a little bit more power to this thing. I do need to tear into the fuel pump so I can change the governor springs in that. I don't want to get too crazy with this thing, but I do want some decent power out of it, and the governor springs allow me to get a little bit more RPM. So maybe I won't have to mess with changing my transmission. It is, like I said, still sitting a little low in the back. I think I'm going to order up or find a source a little add-a-leaf for the back first for it before I get too wild and carried away. Because I do want it sitting a little bit higher in the back so that if I do load it down with a bunch of gear and stuff in the back, it might sit a little bit closer to level. I've come up with a name for my Bronco, and I'm going to run it past you guys and see what you guys think. I kind of want to name it Magnolia, and it's because of this book series that I've been reading, or listening to really. There's a chick character named Magnolia. She's kind of a badass. So I think I'd like to call it Magnolia. That way if I'm out rock crawling trying to climb a hill, I can say, come on Mags, let's go, kind of thing. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, what you think of that name. I don't know. We'll see. My travel all over there is named Annie. I don't have a name for my truck. I do have things that I call it, but not things I want to say online or on the video. Other than that, everything seems to be working well. I'm going to close this video out here, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you're liking this stuff, check out these videos over here on this Bronco. And we will see you guys in the next episode of Fabrication 101. In the meantime, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, and go build something.